That is an argument for another day.
I had to hedge on BS just so it don't get canceled the first 10 seconds, but it's not a cold open if you're in the middle of a rant and you're like,
just
oh, I better shut up
of
so I can hit the button.
That might be the wrong thing to say right now. That is an argument for another day. I'll have that argument, but with more prep.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like there's some corruption going on here. Gonna have to take it to the council.
What council?
Yeah, right. She is the Senate. So Andreas is supposed to say not yet, and then the lightsabers, and then Andreas gets beaten in 2 moves. You know, we've all seen that movie, so yeah.
True. Yep. Yeah.
Right.
Welcome.
Yeah.
We're doing no,
Harrow
the 9th today.
Yes. Yeah. I'm sorry, which of the 9th is it? You know, there's 4 now, so
she should make 9 books.
Yeah, right. Yeah, apparently it was meant to be a trilogy, and then, you know, she realized that she accidentally wrote an entire other book, so there's 4 now. But.
Yes, I do enjoy the story of her talking to an editor. Like, just Alecto's going to be really long. The first act is already over 140,000 words, which is already a very long book side. And he asked for it to be sent to him, and he read it and says, "You idiot! This is a book. We're publishing this." It's like, all right, Alecto's.
He went to lie down.
Yes. He had it was like, whew, that needs a reaction response to it. Had to lie down, come back into it, because if that first act is 140,000 words at least, then the rest of it's going to be like a 300,000 word book. And that same issue like we had with Peace Talk Battlegrounds, of like it becomes so large, it's difficult to publish, and therefore split it up. And nothing even needed to change in the outline from what she said. So it's just Act 1 of Alecto was Nona, but right now we're talking about Harrow the 9th.
Yes.
The cover. Damn, that's important.
Yes. Way cooler art in a lot of ways. I don't know. I just, There's a lot to like from Harrow, I guess.
Wonderfully badass in this, and the fact like she's clearly doing things and there's skeletons around and she's just like walking into battle. It's a great cover.
Nothing
I took it off so I'm not like rustling all the time.
The goodest of voice.
Right. So Harrow the 9th, the book, is a book in some ways that you understand it best the second time through.
Yeah, that's never gonna happen.
All of them are.
But I love it.
Look. Let's just cover it right now. Okay, the author has a style. Go figure. Her style involves not answering a goddamn thing until the final third of the book, and the fact that you have to read it twice to pick up all those little details that you overlooked because they were important. Right. Mm-hmm. So if you don't enjoy those things, you're going to have a tough time with these books because we're 3 books deep, and I'm going to tell you that keeps going, you know? So yeah, like, that's why
an actual appeal to me.
Fine. And that can be, but it's part of why we beat up Ben so bad last time when he's like, oh, I read 4 chapters and decided if I like the book or not. I was like, no, because that's like, you know, eating lima beans and deciding if you like dinner. You know, like the meat is there. You just got to get to the meat and the dessert and everything like that. And then you've got to fucking know the answers to those new questions, and you got to read the next book. So, yeah.
Speaking of dinner, it's a killer dinner scene in this. Sorry.
Is it here? Is it coming? I can't wait. We'll put it on the air for everybody to be reviled.
Okay. So, yes, it's told very confusingly, most importantly confusingly, that there's a large amount of the book, maybe half of it is in second person, but I really didn't mind that.
It's not confusing, okay? So the one-liner description that I was given for Gideon the 9th was lesbian necromancers in space, right? The one-liner I give people for fucking Harrow the 9th is, imagine you're reading a book written by an insane person. It's not confusing. She's insane.
Right. So, I mean, to that point, she is very intelligent and clever, but she cannot trust the information that she has. And so she's going further insane. And you're stuck with her point of view going throughout this book in 2 different stories. And one half of that is told in second person for significant reasons. But yeah, you don't get to know that until like the last 3/4 of the.
I would not say it's a significant reason. I would just say it makes
it is.
sense when you get to the last.
It is a
part.
significant reason. That is an
It's-
important reason.
It's the entire reason. It's the reason she's insane. It's the reason that the final third of the book plays out the way that it is. Like it's the whole thing, you know. But it is taking some getting used to. And then one of the other main things is that it's got a TikTok style of writing with a very strong B story, and the B story is retelling all of the events from the first story, but with an insane person's viewpoint. Like all of the details are different because it's basically like, you know, not like shadow play is the word that comes to mind, but basically it's she's rewritten the history of what happened in the first book to fit with what she does to herself in between book 1 and 2 to make her insane.
So the B
and so
story,
you're like, this isn't how this happened the entire time, but you got to pay attention.
Happens? Is this how it happens? And everyone's asking the question, is this how it happens? I love going through this book for the first time, that the amount of puzzles and like, yes, confusion, but that was so exciting to me. And everyone is asking the same question, is this how it happens? It's like, there's significant shit happening. And I was so excited that when I was reading it, I started like covering the page with my hand. So I wasn't like darting down and reading ahead by just a few inches. And my husband walked in and saw me doing that. I was like, what is wrong with you? I had to explain myself and he still didn't get it.
Yeah.
I don't want to explain myself.
Exactly. Yes. And especially when you're reading it, there's some various points where the text changes font for certain reasons, notes specifically given, letters that are given and discussed. And like, I see one of those on the page, like, oh, what is this? What is this? And then it's like, no, I have to cover it and I read it in the order that she meant it to be read. And so in that way, almost like the audiobook, you don't get to just skip ahead of that. And Margaret Quirk is such a very good performer of it. I think she was really having fun with this book, honestly. So it was like, she does a very good job of making that transfer through sound.
I didn't get, I read Gideon and Harrow, but I listened to Nona, and when I realized who was narrating it, like, I know her most recently because she's like one of the like main side characters in Destiny right now, right? So it's like you get a lot of her voice lines, and it's not like she's hamming it up for being a voice actress. It's more or less her voice, you know. And she's a really good narrator. She gets, I think, a lot of the right inflections, but we've been spoiled by Marsters because she doesn't do like separate characterizations very well, in my opinion.
She
like,
relies on accent, I think, more,
which is
like,
ironic, but
yeah, she's so like that. All of the different houses have slightly different accents. I mean, Augustine and Mercy Morn didn't have very different accents, but their voices, how she inflected it was very different. Mercy Morn was very specific. John was the voice that I had the most issues of hers with, but then after a while I just got used to it, and that's just his voice, and so it never was a problem after like the first few hours of listening. I mean, I guess to describe these two different stories that are happening, we have Harrow trying to become a lictor, and we get at every chapter or significant heading of like 9 months before the Emperor's murder. 7 months before the Emperor's murder, the day of the Emperor's murder. It's like, what is going to happen? It's the tension is so extreme. I get a
feeling that a dude's going to get murdered. I don't know though. It wasn't very well telegraphed. So it's also important. Like if you haven't read the books, right? He is the Necro Lord Supreme. He's the King Undying. So how do you kill the King Undying, right?
And so all of those questions are so much fun.
Right. You got this countdown, but as part of the countdown, right? Like part of the events leading up to it is that there's a new thing that's introduced. Like in Gideon the Ninth, we find out that the Necrolord Prime isn't supposed to come back to what is it, Dominicus, right? Dominicus, which is basically, it's a new name for the solar system. Spoilers. So he's not supposed to come back to Dominicus. Well, in Harrow, we find out why he's not supposed to come back to Dominicus. And that's because he's basically being chased by these giant revenants called resurrection beasts that are kind of the equal and opposite forces of what he did during the resurrection. So when he resurrected the solar system, these resurrection beasts are out there, and the whole time you're like, the Emperor's going to get murdered, but very possibly the Chekhov's gun that's going to do it is this resurrection beast that is closing in on his position, right? So the whole time you're like, oh shit, what's going to happen? When's it going to be there? And there's also like a prologue in the book that is like, oh, P.S. Harrow's bleeding out, bad things are happening, and the heralds have breached the station. And you're like, so you basically get to see like the first 5 minutes of the climax, and then you got to read the entire rest of the book before you get back there.
It's like that fucking like the bad video game opening in a lot of games. Like, oh, you're super powerful and all this building and see these things you don't know yet, and reset, you're nobody.
Yeah, let's go back to 9 months ago. I mean, it's a fairly common trope, right? You get the whole like, oh god, there's explosions and the buildings coming down, and then cut to 9 months ago where there's bunny rabbits in a green field, and we're so happy. Remember how happy we were? Except that we weren't happy because it's grimdark and Harrow's insane, and possibly has always been insane as far as she knows. So, but
yeah, Harrow has got some questionable inputs. Let's see. So the description of the resurrection beast, because that's kind of important. The Emperor does eventually explain like that this is what the lictors have been dying to. Over the course of 10,000 years, the lictors, who are extremely powerful, have been dying to the resurrection beasts, which are the ghosts of murdered planets. Because when he did the resurrection and he flipped the planets, he did it all at once, and he
didn't know any better.
Yeah,
yeah.
That trauma caused a whole resurrection beast, because like he is asking Harrow, what creates a soul? What has a soul? Well, something that has enough spiritual complexity to have one who's basically humanity. But what else might have that much type of complexity of thalurgy, thanergy, and everything else? Like a planet as a whole has its own spiritual imprint. And when that was murdered quickly, it can create a backlash effect of what they call a resurrection beast. And when they were flipped, those planets, dead planets, they ran away to different corners of the universe, and then they were making their way back because they are drawn to anyone who had committed the indelible sin of lictorhood.
Yeah, it's
right. So
it's how they prepare any planet for necromancy, right? They have to kill.
Yeah, I was going to say, just to clarify what you're talking about, flipped, for those of us that have read it. Like, so there's two forms of necromantic energy that they detail in the books, like to get into a little bit of the science of it. Thalurgy is the life magic, and it's what live people do, right? So thalurgy is useful for some things like healing and that sort of thing, I think. And then thanergy is the necromantic energy that dead people, and dead things happen. And so you get a little bit of a taste that it's like, so the cohort is like their military arm. They're running around to a bunch of other planets, basically making them thanergetic so that necromancers can move in and do necromancy shit. Well, it turns out that when he resurrected the solar system, as Dominicus and whatever, he murdered all of the planets and then didn't realize what was going on yet. So they all formed these resurrection beasts. The planet's souls basically became revenants and fled into the galaxy. And they basically just ran screaming for like 1,000 years before they turned around and started coming back hungry. But like when she's talking about flipped, they were thalurgetic, and then they got murdered and became thanergenic planets. So.
And this is a big part of the world building of this is a process that takes a long time, as Harrow understands it, because that's all she's ever known it as being. Like, the cohort will land and start killing things and to create some thanergy. The necromancers will start making the change slowly, and over time, the population has to be moved because the planet is likely populated by people, and they cannot live in a thanergetic planet if they have already been thalurgetic. They don't match. And likewise...
Go ahead. You're good.
A thanergetic population has issues living on a thalurgenic planet without the thanergy. You see that more in Nona, but it's like this population movement is a thing. And the Empire under Necrolord Prime is always increasing outward and always pushing against these others, and they're fighting back, and they're known as the terrorists. And we get the name BOE, or Blood of Eden.
Right. Yeah, that's what I was going to clarify too, because like that gets added in layers, right? Like you find out that the cohort is running around making a bunch of skeletons and shit a little bit in Gideon the Ninth, right? To give you a little bit of background flavor. You know that there's a war, right? You know, it's almost like 1984. Like we're always at war with, East Asia or whatever. And then in Harrow, you find out a little bit more, and you find out that there's a terrorist group, and they actually like had nukes somehow and took out a couple of the the empire's. Yeah, they took out like 3 ships, right? And so it's like, okay, well now we've
18,000
got to
people
pay.
murdered, I think.
Yeah, we've got to pay attention to them a little bit. And then finally in Nona, you find out that because it wasn't explicitly said, like I was wondering, it's like, well, who are they fighting outside of the solar system, right? So for like the first 2 books, it's like, okay, so we've got a couple of terrorists over here, but I felt like they kind of downplayed them until the very end of the book, obviously. And then so you're just like, well, yeah, in Harrow. So it's like, who are they fighting? Are they fighting other people? Are they fighting skinnies? The Starship Troopers cartoon, right? Like, did they go out and find alien life, and that's who they're fighting? They're wresting planets away from these people. How bad are we talking? And then in Nona, you finally get to find out what's actually going on, as far as that's concerned.
Which I haven't found out yet.
Yeah.
Think of all of
the
bad
how
depictions.
far into the book?
They Gideon just woke up.
Okay.
That doesn't narrow it down for me.
I know. I think I know what point he's at. After
they just went to the military facility and got out.
Say that again, Andreas.
They just went in and went out again from the military facility.
Was this the tantrum or not yet?
After the tantrum, after the cosplay, and then they got out, and then they're running around and prepping for the next phase. I know.
So you should very much understand like what's going on with the BOE by now, though. Like it's going to get even more spelled out for you, but the pieces are there.
What's going on with the BOE mostly, and not entirely. I'm still not quite sure. I understand the Angels' role and the factions, but yeah.
Yeah, which
I'm going to redirect us back to Harrow because you're not going to get much. Right?
That's
okay. But the point is,
have to read additional reading afterwards to get some of that. So
the Empire is entirely expanding outwards because the Emperor says so, and people don't necessarily want their planet destroyed because they have to be moved away. The population has to be moved, and so that the Empire can take into these new out planets. And there's some strife there. That's why the cohort is constantly fighting people. They have a very high attrition rate over in general, but also attrition rate kind of creates more energy. And hey, that's kind of a good thing when you're necromancers. Yes, cohort.
That's why I love being a necromancer at a war, because attrition is a win for us. If you lose or I lose, I win because I just make more skeletons. So
exactly. Right. But the lictors, as powerful as they are and extremely useful as they do all these things, they can do necromancy on a level that most other necromancers cannot, just because the amount of battery they have access to because they consumed another person's soul, but they're also the target that the resurrection beasts are slowly and yet inevitably coming for them. And so they can never go back home. They can never go back to the Dominicus system. And that's what when Kithareya went to Canaan House with the literal trial, she was drawing the resurrection beast exactly where they didn't want it to go, and that's why she was drawing John back there to get her or them or to as a response. And the opening of this, like, you really need to leave. You doom your houses by staying here because it's just outside the system. And so they go away 40 billion light years away through the river to the Mithraeum, and the river is very complicated. The Mithraeum is a giant Skullington space station.
I still haven't gotten this confirmed yet, but ever since the Harrow and since we got introduced to the river, I have this theory that the state of what we see of the river, that's not how it's supposed to be. I'm guessing the God Emperor probably fucked it up.
Very possibly, and that's what Abigail says. Because dead people get to be characters again because they're necromancers.
Well, for a couple that has so many layers, you can't just like drop that line and it's going to make sense. But yeah, I mean, so like the river is it's basically like subspace in a sense, right? Like it's a subplane of existence in a way, but it's also very visceral. And so, like we actually spend a lot of time in Harrow the Ninth dealing with the river and talking about those mechanics, and even during the climax, like it's all important. And then you get a little teeny tiny taste just to give you 45 new questions in Nona. But basically, apparently lictors and the Necrolord Prime can use it as like super hyperspace, that they can travel 40 billion light years by traveling the river. Which is nuts. And then that's how they often get in and out of a variety of different places. Like they have to dip into the river when they're killing a planet, because like a third of the book is basically like Harrow's learning how to be a lictor. And mostly what lictors do is what the cohort does, but faster. That they're more or less like uber special forces, because they'll drop one person in, they'll murder a planet, they'll drop into the river and murder the revenant before it turns into a resurrection beast. That's how they do it.
Because
now.
There's a thing that one of the resurrection beasts, they call it number 7, is close, and he's only 9 months away as the beginning of the book, and they have to they prepare as much as possible. And they have Harrow, who's insane, and Ianthe, who's missing an arm, and they've got 2 other lictors, 3 I guess, and there's like 5 total, but very dysfunctional, and they have to prepare or else everyone's going to die. And possibly, oh no, the Emperor, because if the Emperor dies, the whole system dies, they believe.
Right.
And as the resurrection beast is getting closer, there are living planets in its way, and it can eat them and get more powerful. So they have to do like a fire break of all those planets. And so they go out killing the planets and doing exactly the thing that makes resurrection beast, but killing the revenant, as you say, right at that moment, instead of letting it go away and become more powerful and become insane.
Yeah. So speaking of insane, that's bonkers, but yeah. It makes a kind of sense.
Right. And speaking of insane, let's describe Harrow's multiple flavors of insanity. Because she does have multiple versions of issues. Like, to start with, she was born by a little genocide, as described in Gideon, that her parents had murdered 200 children to capture the Thanergetic burst and make sure that she was a necromancer, a powerful necromancer, and that she would live through the pregnancy. I get the feeling that not only was her mother aging and having difficulties that way, but a necromantic child has probably harder pregnancies and on the mother in general. So they didn't have vat wombs or womb technology in general that the other planets have, and they're too proud to ask for it, and so they had to suffer and genocide. And she was constantly being told and kind of tortured about the idea of 200 people had died for you to live. You are the most important thing of the 9th house, other than the locked tomb, of which you must protect for forever. And it was that little prayer that she would say every night. It's like, the tomb I'll serve to the end of my days, and then see me buried in 200 graves. It just, nice. Those dead children are constantly carried with her. And when she was in the river the first time, which she thought of as the first time at least, when they were going to the Mithraeum, all of these dead baby children are swelling up around her, and everyone's seeing something different, but she is haunted by the dead that carry her in the river. And then she sees this little baby with a skull-painted face and red hair, and then so she freaks out because she has no idea who that is. She has removed the memory of Gideon and replaced every instance of Gideon in her becoming a lictor with Ortis, who would have been her Cavalier primary, but he left and he died. And somehow on this other B story, we're getting Canaan House story again of trying to become a lictor, and then everything goes wrong, really wrong. And Ortis is there, being very large and telling a saga about Matthias Nonius.
I mean, Ortis was. I liked Ortis, to be honest.
Yeah.
He had a bit of. He had more lip to him than I thought he would have as well, which I found quite enjoyable.
At first,
but it was also
like, going to be boring, but that's like, oh, he's actually kind of charming in his own way.
Yeah, he was lippy, but in a self-deprecating manner still, like he'll, if he ever said a cross word, he'd be like, and I'm going to go whip myself now because how dare I, type of thing. But I was also going to tack on. So it's like, her parents murdered their 200 children, right? Like all of the kids in their house, right? With one exception. One of them survived and nobody knows why, which is kind of fucking important to the book and an entire reason why I had to read 2 books to find out. So just, priming the pump for that one for later.
Yes. That they did mention that's why like Gideon had always thought that people didn't like her. Maybe she thought it was just a flu in the VAT system or something. But no, it was that she had taken 10 minutes of terrible poison neurochemicals into the face and she didn't die. But even just setting it up had made the great aunts go blind. And that they were terrified of her because she was the baby that didn't die.
Yeah, she was the boy that lived. And that was generally a horrifying experience for everybody, which is a weird thing for necromancers, but whatever.
They're used to it, but also it's still horrifying. And
yeah,
for Harrow's insanity, yes, at 10 years old, she kind of described it being like she wanted to die, and so she was going to at least see, was the tomb worth it to serve for the end of her days, or was it something that isn't worthwhile? And so she spent a year breaking into the tomb. With the amount of necromantic ability at 10 years old, that's astounding. And she attributes it to some amount of the 200 dead souls that birthed her. And she gets in and she sees the body. And then after that, she starts seeing the body everywhere. It follows her around. It's like goes in and out of the room. And she can't be sure if it is a person that looks like the body or if it is just an apparition that was only in her mind. And so she was apparently leaning on crux to it's like, is this real or is it not? Is the sound a thing? And he would say things like, you saw what you saw. The only thing you can say is your reaction there too. And then when going to Canaan House without someone, at least in this retelling of the story, she has to rely on Ortis to tell her what is real and what is not. What am I seeing? What is going on? Because she's insane and she has to hide that so that others are not taking advantage of her because she's still expecting traps and movements from everyone else. The 5th house, the 6th house, everyone.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of supposition from the other houses that the 9th house was supposed to go set up the tomb and die. So they weren't supposed to be there. They're sort of as a byproduct of a lot of different things, the weakest house, right? And the fact that they have no children now and their population's basically aging to death. So Harrow's childhood spends like a huge amount of time, worrying about the other houses finding out and swooping in to try and make them like a vassal house, right? Even though, as near as I can tell, that's never happened. That's been a concern of hers the whole time, right? And it's the beginning of Harrow, right, where we see the cryogenic people.
Yes.
So that finally gets alleviated. You know. So
she had asked for a renewal given to her house, and John obliges. He has a lot of the sacred dead, I think she called them, from the first house before the incident that was the extinction event. Not touching that. There was a lot of people who were dead for 10,000 years, and they are in a bunch of tombs, and so he's going to wake them all up, bring them up to the surface, and then ship them back to the 9 houses. And at first she wants to go with them, but then she gets told about the resurrection beast, and she can never, ever go back to the 9th house. But this population is going to, I forgot the number of how many there were, but a third of them will be necromantically inclined, and a third of their children, until more of it is able to create into the populace. But they are renewed. They will be more populated and not die out from old age.
Which I find is also very important, because if his intent was that the 9th house was going to go and die, he could have just literally sat there and laughed in her face and just been like, of course I'm not going to renew your house. But instead, he actually I wanted to say it was like 200, but I might be conflating it with the other 200. But
or something.
Yeah, he sent a couple hundred people, which is like, as near as we can tell, like, there aren't that many people in the 9th house right now, so they're just going to wake up and be like, hey, guess what? You guys like skeletons now. So I hope you're ready for that.
We're all about the skellies here.
Yep.
You're inclined to spirit magic? That's nonsense.
Yeah.
I do really enjoy
You're not going to have a good time. Yeah.
The type of kind of inter-academic fighting of like the flesh magician and their issues and weaknesses, and then the bone magician who has 50 words for the color of off-white.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny too, because like in a lot of ways, like the way that I took it anyways is presented that bone magic is the weakest of them, right? Because at least like the flesh magicians can heal you and some other stuff like that. The spirit magicians in some ways are like more powerful, but also like wildly more dangerous and scary because what they spend a chunk of telling you in Gideon the Ninth and even a little bit in Harrow the Ninth is like, when you leave your body, that just makes it an empty vessel and anything can just pop in, which, they still haven't entirely covered as far as I know. So they discuss all of those, horrific kind of ideas in Gideon the Ninth pretty deeply. And then it comes up several more times that it's even worse when a lictor does it, because a lictor's like leaving a jet with the keys in it, and be like, not only can anybody get inside, they can do whatever the hell they want with all of that power at that point. So,
I found the number. It's a little under 500 of dead.
There you go.
Resurrecting. Yes. Let's see.
Speaking of healing and flesh magic, something I was wondering is well, we know from Nona that at least that it seems like it, like before a planet is primed, you can do necromantic magic because he does it. But can you? So can someone do the not death magic, the
Allergy.
Allergy? Can someone heal, for example, if they're necromantically inclined without the planet having to have been prepped for necromancy?
The problem is you need a source of energy to burn, and that is what lictors have that other necromancers don't. The other necromancers need to use it from an ambient source or their own body or dead people, but lictors have that battery going around with them for forever, so they are able to do things in places where they are not. And John is a special example, and we're going to plug that one away for a while.
He cheats, and like I don't think the magic system's like amazingly well defined. I think it's pretty well defined, but there's still definitely some questions like why lictors can consume a single soul and that'll last forever, but we've got to go like murk a bunch of planets and that's more like oil where it's just like we're burning it all the time. I don't understand the difference there, right? And it's not really important to the story per se, but like one thing that we see in Nona, without getting too deep and too spoilery, is like the B story in Nona is from the Emperor's perspective, and he's telling you about the time before the collapse or before the resurrection anyway. And he's able to do all of his Thanergy just by being around corpses. And so, like even a thalergenic planet is a thalergenic planet because the soul is still alive. But he can still pull Thanergy from other dead things. And that's what the cohort does too, right? The cohort shows up, stabs a bunch of people with swords. Hey, look, Thanergy. That's what they're doing, right? Like it's I don't think it's expressly spelled out, but that's the implication in their science, in their politics, and what's going on, is that when the cohort invades a planet, they send down a bunch of cavalier type dudes, stab a bunch of things with swords so the necromancers can show up and create a foothold. Because they made Thanergy out of dead bodies. Like that's what's going on.
So every living creature will have a mix of Thanergy versus Thalergy, but I think that a Thanergetic population just has like much more Thanergy than normal, and they kind of need it, especially a necromancer, to be able to live. But a normal Thalergenic population still does have Thanergy. It's just much smaller amounts, but you have pieces of you dying all the time. In your living body, you have like bacteria, skin cells, blah, blah, blah. You're a mix of both. And then, but if you die, then like you're all Thanergy.
Right.
Yeah. So
well, and another thing while we're on the topic, like the 9 houses are also special because they don't run out, right? Like whatever happened during the resurrection is their Thanergetic planets forever, as near as anyone can tell. But in order to expand, they've got to turn things into Thanergenic planets. And then something that gets a lot of screen time, but I don't think is entirely spelled out, but whatever, you kind of get the idea, is like when they're running around. Hold on, I'm losing my train of thought. So like, I don't even know anymore. So they're running around killing the planets, and then my brain just was like, nope, that's all we're going to talk about. So
So a thanergetic planet that's been flipped will produce its own thanergetic, because it's a communal thing, especially if it has a living population of thanergy, and then it's just doing the cycle but inverted. And then like the planets that are flipped and then they die, I think they could still be you can have a thanergetic population put onto it. They'll also blast stars with thanergy, just like they did with Dominicus, so that they're not thalergenic to be eaten by a resurrection beast, and that will give its own reflective thanergy to the planets that's getting its light. So, for example, on one of the planets that Harrow had to go kill, and then significant things happened during that trip, Mercy Morn went to the moon nearby because it was going to get a reflective thalergy, and it was still a place where the resurrection beast could get energy.
That's the story we were told.
Not what you're thinking. The time frame is wrong, but I know what you're thinking.
No, yeah, but there's no evidence that she was there anyway. So anyway, the thought that I had that I came back to is that the reason, like tying back to us talking about them moving the population and stuff like that, when you convert a planet from thalergy to thanergy, shit can survive there, but it starts to get mutated and weird.
And they
so
can't
like
produce
that's
anymore.
that's another byproduct of, basically flipping the planet and whatever like that, which, becomes a little bit more important as the books go on and whatnot.
So to describe more of the two different storylines, I guess there's the one, the story of Canaan House and how it's different is most everyone is there, but then it's also different in that there is a sleeper. There is a monster that is apparently sleeping, and then it wakes up if you make too much noise or something, and then it starts killing people. And then people start dying, and it's very confusing. The people who die are, Judith, Deuteros, and Palamides and Camilla. And so Harrow believes that they are dead, even though it's not quite the right frame. We know more of what happened to those people. And then she sees Silas Octokizaron murder Corona Bethradentarius, and they just jump off a ledge, I think, or he pushes her off and follows after her, and he says cryptic things of like, you should suffer as I have suffered, and you do not remember your end, and significant cryptic things. And Harrow isn't even sure that anything is happening. She has to keep checking with Ortis or wonder what's going on. The walls start changing and being kind of like all fleshy, and there's a lot of vials, and everything is like red mist, and it's raining blood, essentially. It's all very cold. Everyone kind of like clumps together, and Abigail is trying to figure out what's going on, and she's the one who has most of the details in general. She's the spirit magician and is in her element, though Harrow doesn't fully understand why. And she even starts to wonder about, like, Harrow, you might be haunted. Have you thought of that yet? And Magnus is like, oh, here we go, the ghost agenda.
Has she always been haunted?
That's complicated. I don't fully know, because of the 200 that birthed her, that those signatures stayed in some whatever spiritual signatures that Abigail can find. Mm-hmm. But then whatever Harrow experiences with the body, I don't know if that's a haunting or if it's an insanity or anything else like that.
Well, I take it more as a haunting or something. Like I think the body's actually there, because it's just a little bit too on the nose in a couple of places. So I personally, ascribe to the fact that she's basically always been haunted, whether she knew or not. But,
she is also like confirmed haunted by the Blood of Eden woman.
Right. So
and when did
that story is complicated, and it does take a little bit of pieces, and it's one that you kind of have to understand backwards.
That's why you have to read the story twice,
at least,
to put some of those.
So Harrow has kept in the Mithraeum the sword that she just believes that, well, God gave it to me, so I'm going to keep it around. And she had given instructions to herself of, even though she doesn't remember it, of keep the sword with you and douse it in arterial blood and all these things. But she always believes that the sword hates her. She believes that it was going to be the thing that kills her, and maybe just at the hands of Gideon. Gideon loves the sword, but that's why she's keeping it with her. It is her piece of Gideon that she's allowing herself, even though she's completely overwritten the memory.
Didn't she
And
make a promise though too? Like she basically she made a promise to keep the sword, or at least she thinks that she did. So
something like, and even though
yeah,
like the sword was in what she thinks was given to her by God, and so she is very devout and she's going to do it, and she is very protective of it and doesn't want anyone else to take it away from her.
yeah.
But he also keeps telling her to practice with your rapier, even though Gideon never really used the rapier. She hated it too. So,
Yeah. Well, so and this probably approaches spoilers for like Nona and that sort of thing, but like I've definitely seen some theories, if nothing else, suggesting that the sword may be the focus of a revenant as well. So, so like it's entirely possible she's at least been haunted since she had the sword, but
that's what I think. So,
yeah.
to try to encapsulate, the sleeper is haunting her, and the sleeper is leaving notes in her mental story of what she's telling herself because she's removed the thing. But it's like it's doing two purposes. It's giving her memories that of filling the hole that she put into her own brain, and also it is a schema of how to have a scenario to work to fight the haunting. And she has unconsciously recruited all of these people back to her to help her at Canaan House, which is probably the last time she felt capable and happy, and she didn't know it.
Mm.
Yeah.
And so fighting the sleeper reveals some things, and also at any point when Harrow hears the name Gideon and it rewrites into her own brain, she hears Ortis, and everyone thinks she's insane because she is. When things get too close to her, yeah, it's like, what is the name of the saint of duty? Ortis the First. Who?
Yeah.
When let's see, when she sees or hears anything about Canaan House, she starts having an intracranial hemorrhage because she made a construct of her own temporal bone to press on her brain to make it happen and stop. And this is continuing, and she's not dying from the damage that she's inflicting on herself, but it's continuing the insanity.
Constantly heal, right?
Yes, because
she's got lictoral healing, kind of.
Only kind of. Because she's stunted, even though she has the energetic battery, because she did not fully incorporate or acknowledge Gideon's soul in herself. She has only limited ability to heal, and she has to do it intentionally, very painfully. Now, throughout these 9 months, she's trying various ways of trying to get it to trigger, of like, maybe if she hurts herself a significant amount, it'll kick in and she'll start healing. And that didn't work. But that's irrelevant.
She's beaten within an inch of her life several times, and that,
on to Ortis the First. It's so hard to keep one train of thought with this book because everything's so tangled, and I love it so much. Ortis the First, the saint of duty, keeps trying to kill her a lot, and he is very capable. And so, like Augustine and Mercy Moon both say things of like, if he wants you dead, you're dead. Get your affairs in order. But they don't help her. And she, as paranoid as she is, she's obviously warding her rooms, and in as much ways as possible. She is a bone magician, and she does a lot of bone wards, which works
simply.
Right. This is such a great section of the book, in my opinion. Like, so he broke in when she was in the bath, which was very awkward. He took out the Thanergy from her bone wards and
her bone armor.
Yes.
Like that, like, so if you remember the cover from the first of the episode, right? She's got an exoskeleton that is literally a skeleton, and that comes up multiple times throughout the book, and she's sheathing that sword basically in bone, right?
Yes.
And she's in the bath, but she's still got like her exoskeleton on because from Gideon the Ninth, she's almost never truly naked, right? They joke about how they're basically nuns and all of this stuff, right? So this is like a samurai level of dedication. She's not away from her sword hardly. She's not away from her armor or anything like that. But he drains the freaking Thanergy out of her wards and crashes through the ceiling, and then pulls the Thanergy off of her armor. And because she's a bone magician, like that's where all her magic is. And so she's basically just there with a sword that she doesn't know how to use,
doesn't have the strength to use.
And she doesn't have the strength to use because she's been literally growing extra bone to help her hold the sword the way she's supposed to, So
And it was a very fun little fight scene because the description of desperation probably saved her life. She didn't have any more bone around her, so she just shot bone from her palms out at him. Which I wish EG was here because he's watched Naruto, and there was a particular character who did basically the same thing.
I know who you're talking about.
Kimimaru, I think was his name. That was such a great reference of that. But she's shooting bones at him and pulverizes his eyeballs. It's a pretty significant damage that they do, and both of them are hurt. But she is like broken. He does enough damage to her that she is like on the ground, crying and incapable of moving anything. And then Ianthe walks in. It's like, oh, this isn't how I expected to happen at all. And she just walks out. It doesn't help, doesn't put it together. But the description of like Harrow was so desperate and for any form of goodness that if Ianthe had been even a little bit nice to her, she probably would have just been a gibbering mess.
Hold on. This one goes out to the fans. Bone magician. She's shooting that bone, if you know what I mean. Cody's being a child over there because he's with a literal child. But
Cody, you're gonna love Gideon if you read these books.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, they definitely got the right kind of innuendo and jokes at certain times. We got Sex Pal, we got dirty magazines, the whole thing.
Oh, we get worse with that though because Orcus the First, even though routinely trying to kill her, is also found doing weird things to Kithurea's corpse. And Harrow just walks in and he's bent over doing something nasty, and then she immediately walks over and goes to talk to Ianthe. It's like, I saw him giving into corpse compulsion, and Ianthe is like, ooh, was he really like waxing necrolagic or committing the sin that cannot be named? And I think the description was just that he was kissing her. It's like, oh, everyone's done that.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And,
well, and so like after this attack, to continue the frame of mind, right? She spends like 5 days without sleep, right?
6 days.
6 days, okay.
She cannot.
Which culminates in even more epic scene, in my opinion.
I mean, you all know, we know. Like I know, like everybody knows, right? What's going to happen here? Like it's pretty
so wonderful. I love that. It's a killer dinner scene.
Honestly, I was as surprised as everybody at the table. So
you were.
When I read it the first time, I was like, rolling it back, sure, makes loads of sense. But yeah, it was like, obviously, as she's laying it out, like I twigged to it before they did, but still, like, just the whole, like, holy shit.
Right, but there's even a tiny.
This is using the magic system correctly, right? It's like, we've set up the rules, and if you'd been paying attention, you could have thought of this,
So to describe the magic system, even though there's all the energetic abilities of the lictors and they're so powerful, there's so much energy in each lictor that they're actually like blank voids to their necromantic senses. They cannot see the necromancy inside of each other because there's just too much of it, and it's blank. And so if you're trying to do necromancy on another lictor, you basically have to make it external, but Harrow has another way of going about it. It's not like trying to find a foreign body in a lictor is not going to be possible. So she's smarter than that. And as she isn't sleeping and she's having issues, and she asks John is having tea and biscuits, although she doesn't ever eat the biscuit because she can't handle flavor. He's encouraged, like, when's the last time you sleep? Why don't you make a meal? Do the good human things, like the normal rejuvenating things of humanity. And she doesn't really understand what food is. And so she asks, how do you make soup? It's like, oh, you put a bunch of things in a pot and you boil it down, and then you add a few teaspoons of salt, and then it tastes like a few teaspoons of salt. Ianthe doesn't know how to cook either.
Yeah, and she was a princess. Why would she know how to
exactly
cook?
Yeah. And so 6 days of being awake because she cannot bear to sleep because he's broken through her wards, and she's terrified of Ortis, and he must die because this can't happen anymore. There's a hilarious moment when she's talking with John, is like she's asking certain questions, but what she really wants to say is, Lord, one of your fists and gestures keeps trying to kill me on the reg. Is this fine with you?
Right.
And Moira's execution of that line is wonderful. So she's cooking soup, and John likes to do all of these family dinners, essentially. Everyone gets together and sits down and try to be nice and friendly and have conversation. And Harrow follows a recipe, and she locks herself in the bathroom to do what needs to be doing. And then she keeps watching the timer, and then when it beeps, she almost screams and takes several minutes to shut it off. And I really love the description of what it's like to be without sleep. The sense of it's really hard to figure out what the words are. It's like that roughness of like the needles on your brain of like when you're that far gone without sleep, everything hurts so bad, and that's what Harrow is in. And she noticed that Ortis has certain vegetables that he really doesn't like to eat. So she put all of them in the soup. So he was eating mostly only the broth, which is flavored by marrow. And then as soon as she answered the question, what is this thing that's flavoring it? He bursts out with like a skeleton construct that she had been growing inside of him because she used her own marrow. She sectioned her tibia for it, put it in the broth. Everyone was drinking it and then building it by cell into a seismoid bone. And from that, an entire construct bursting out of his abdomen all over the dinner table. And John's like, surely you don't think I'm going to let you kill each other in front of me. But he's trying to kill me every day.
Right. I mean, there's so much into this scene, right? Like, this cannot be squicky enough because I personally just see it as like, you know, the scene in Terminator 2 where he gets blown apart by a grenade and you just see the metallic and he's just flopping around and shit. Imagine that, but a real person. Like, I'm sorry, but like, we're dealing with necromancers and this guy can't die. But like, that's the image that pops into my head, is that there's just like a skeleton torso sticking out of this dude's other torso, right? And like, it's so funny because, you know, because God, basically the Necrolord Prime and everything like that, he's there to be like, it's been 10,000 years since I've consumed human flesh and I could have gone another myriad without it or something like that.
Yes.
Because he's just so annoyed by like, yeah, this has clearly gone too far now, you know? So.
But does it?
Yeah.
She has managed something extremely powerful. Just the cleverness of using her own marrow cells. That's why it wasn't foreign and she could find it and she could still control it. And she's trying to drive it, a part of the skeleton straight up into his brain to kill him. That everyone is frozen because God has the power to just make everyone stay put. And he's still just spewing blood everywhere and constantly healing and everything. And she's asking for help. She's like, I do not come to you as a lictor. I come to you as a supplicant. I cannot live like this. I am hunted. And it just tells everyone to go away, and the skeleton eventually stops, and everything is put back to normal. Like, there is no hint that Ortis has been almost killed. And so Ianthe is taking Harrow to bed to sleep because she really needs to sleep. And Ortis and Augustine leave for a cigarette because now he really needs a cigarette. And
because when you've been exploded from the inside out, you gotta fucking smoke. Like, come on.
And Mercy Morn is about to get up and go away, and she's always the one of like, "Oh, you're just a baby. You're like 15 years old. You are actively in puberty."
I think she gets down to like 9 or 2 or something.
Yeah,
yeah. At one point,
isn't it this scene or something? But there's some scene where it's like, I thought you were teaching her. I thought you were watching her. How could I know she was going to do this? She's only 9 years old. You know,
right?
Like...
That's what she says. Of how long have you been awake, Harrow? And John is asking, like, it's been 6 days since she could sleep because she is so hunted she can't do anything. And Mercy Morn has been a very inattentive teacher, and he makes her sit when everyone else is leaving. He's like 6 days without sleep, and she still managed a full reconstruction from diluted marrow. What else have you missed, Mercy Morn? And she says, but this is insane. She's only 9 years old.
Right. Yeah, just the whole scene from start to finish is like, it's really well done. Yeah.
And as leaving, Harrow sees Ortis and Augustine smoking, and Ortis raises his cigarette in an unmistakable salute, which is the best compliment you could probably get from him.
Well played.
Right.
Yes. And onto Ianthe, a little bit story, because as all of this is playing out, Ianthe has a right arm that she refuses to use. It had been ripped off by Kithareya, and a very good donor had been put on, but it's not entirely perfect, and therefore she refuses to use it. She doesn't like it, and it's affecting when her cavalier is supposed to be taking over her body. And even though Nibirius Turn is a very good fighter, perfect tournament fighter and all that, her psychological issue is affecting his performance, which is going to get her killed and possibly get them all killed. So something needs to happen. And Augustine, who has been teaching Mercy Morn, gives a deadline. And that deadline is the day after the dinner party. And she has to get something figured out. She's still trying to practice, even though she's basically accepted death. And Harrow is sleeping. And then she wakes up in Ianthe's rooms, and Ianthe's trying to cut the arm off, because if it's missing, then that's at least better than a hindrance otherwise. There was the idea that Ianthe might be able to recreate her own arm, use the literal process, cut it off, and like redo it from herself. But she would miss something. She's very certain that she would do something wrong and it wouldn't be perfect, and then she wouldn't want it, and she's back in the same state. Mercy Morn could do it, but she's scary enough. No one trusts her. No one wants her to touch them at all. If Mercy Morn touches you, run away.
Right.
God
yeah, Mercy Morn.
Won't.
Yeah, Mercy Morn has studied the human body so long that she could do, for a shorthand way of looking at it, she could basically do chiropractic, adjustments just with her hands. But it's like she could touch you and diagnose you, because she can feel what's wrong with you, and she can feel where the bones are and stuff. Which there's a couple of hints in general, like that's a thing necromancers can do, right? They can tell you're a necromancer by touching you and feeling the energy and whatever. But like she's got it down to the point where like the other lictors who are just as old and powerful as her, like that's her specialty, right? If she gets her hands on you, she could do whatever the hell she wants to your body, so.
But no one trusts her.
Come up again later.
Yeah. What? That's crazy. Yeah.
Sorry.
It's not all that comes up. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So sorry, crude jokes. It's inevitable.
Lesbian necromancers in space. Come on.
Yeah, right. But that one wasn't a lesbian.
Yeah.
Okay. Ianthe. So she's trying to cut off her own arm, but she's not doing it in the right way. It has to come off all at once. And so she's just kind of suffering on her bed. And Harrow has the ability to do all of this. So she says it has to come off all at once. She takes off the arm and she starts regrowing a bone-only arm from Ianthe's own shoulder. She's using Ianthe's own basically genetic memory of what the bone is supposed to look like throughout the humerus and rebuilding. It's a lot of detail, which is very good medical stuff. And then she links in some nerves so that she even has feeling. She can move it. And Ianthe puts a pad of fat around the palm so she can still use the sword and all that. But instead of having a broken, unwanted arm, she has a bone-only skeletal arm that is then, because it is of her, there is no longer a rejection that she has. And she's able to fight perfectly. And then Augustine says it's ghastly, and then he'll gild it for her. So it is all bright and golden arm only. And the amount of necromantic ability it took to do that was actually kind of extreme. So Mercy Morn was even like, I can't tell if you're an idiot or a genius or both. Because she's still like, what is the name of the saint of duty? Ortis the First. Who are you talking about?
Right.
It's also amazing how God just misses. Like he does. It's not until he like gets really close to her and then realizes, hey, did someone fuck your temporal lobe?
But he didn't touch her until then, and that was like the thing of.
But he's
didn't quite understand.
He can do some crazy shit.
He can. Yeah. He totally can. And
he can do all the crazy shit. So
on to the next dinner scene is because Augustine and Ianthe agree Ortis should die because he's a mad dog without a leash anymore, or something to that effect. And he's been pain in Augustine's side for past 40 years, and so he might as well die. And you're starting to get some of the details of that. But they have a new dinner party, and this one is Augustine's making. Everyone has to dress and be fancy, and Ianthe's going to stick Harrow in a dress and be pretty as much as she can make it. And there's a good line of like, no, I just want to be a nun. It's like, Harrow, have you ever read a trashy romance novel where there's some life-affirming change of makeup and party clothes, and then you go to parties like, oh no, I've never seen you like this before, and then there's a mule on a page, 15 page after that, and then the word nipple 1 page after that? No, we have no shared point of reference.
Yeah.
So everyone gets all pretty, and there's a small point of a meeting between Mercy Morn and Augustine. Most of it through like eyebrows and shrugs, even though, so what is the plan?
Yeah, they've all known each other. So like, that's how they communicate, right?
Yeah. I was going to mention that. Like, it comes up 2 or 3 times in the book, and I think it's a fantastic detail, right? It's like, you have lived with these people for 10,000 years. This is the whole form of like having an argument with a raised eyebrow, right?
Mhm.
And you already know what they're going to say, and they know what you're going to counter with, and so they basically, start with like the first syllable of a word and some shrugs, and it comes out as grunts. But then, one of them acquiesces, and they go back to their corners, because they've had this argument 10,000 times,
Yes.
so
And Augustine says the plan is, and there's some like negotiation of like, swear on the sword. Okay, I won't do this, or something that you don't really get to have the details with. But Augustine has some dirt on Mercy Morn and is going to stay quiet as long as Mercy Morn helps do this happen, because they're going to do the distraction to allow Harrow to kill Ortis. And that plan is Dios Apate Minor. And she is so mad at it, she hits him and his teeth go flying. He does ask, like, whatever you do it above the neck, because none of my shirts are pressed. And she sticks to that.
Right.
But like she has to like reform his jaw. Minor, he repeats, minor. And that matters somehow. And then they have an argument in eyebrows. And as Harrow and Ianthe are watching this, they have a conversation in eyebrows of, what is this? And they've only been with each other for 9 months. And so the haunting feeling of like, oh God, this is going to be us in 10,000 years. This is horrible. Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably not happening.
Yeah.
But this leads to the dinner party, of which Augustine's grand plan is everybody gets drunk. Very drunk.
I didn't even think Lixus could get drunk.
They still need to sleep.
Yeah.
They still need water. I guess they can.
They would metabolize poison so fast that
Yeah.
they could heal it.
I would guess, like in this case, for the sake of argument, it's probably more of an active thing, right? They probably could just process it, with Thanergy, but they have to, filter it out of their liver or something, instead of just it happens in the background. Like the regeneration is subconscious, right? It's almost genetic for a lictor at this point, but.
Yeah. I mean, the Harrow does do that, right? When she walks down the hallway in a little bit here in the story. She's
right.
She's like filtering and like doing it consciously. I just thought it would happen subconsciously.
Well, not for her, certainly, but
not for like she specifically says. But I thought for the others they wouldn't get drunk, but apparently,
Yeah, well, with enough bottles of wine, white wine that Mercy Morn insists on, they can get fairly drunk. They start an argument. They talk about Pyrrha being the hottest cavalier, and Ortis gets uncomfortable enough that he leaves. And then the next signal is when they all start kissing. Like Augustine and Mercy Morn having an argument, and then they're
so funny how uncomfortable Harrow gets.
Yes. She's a nun, mind you, so
it's brilliant. Like the impropriety of it. She says that her brain briefly calcifies into atheism. This is just so wrong.
Yeah, just to clarify, who's kissing whom in this scene?
So it starts with Augustine and Mercy Morn trying to suck each other's tongues out of their skulls. And then Augustine turns and kisses John.
Right. Yeah. Sorry, Cody's reaction. WTF for these books, but yeah. So Mercy Morn girl, Augustine guy, they're kissing and they hate each other by all accounts, right? Even though that they're working together and whatever, they have an understanding, but they hate each other. And then Augustine starts kissing God, know, and
that's
so
wrong.
Yeah, Harrow Hark's soul literally leaves her body at that point, and then she's just like, "Well, it's time to go," know. Like,
yes, and then like she's watching horrified, like deer in lights, and can't do anything else. And Ianthe's pulling on her. It's like, this is the cue to leave. When people start kissing, that is always the cue to leave. There's impromptu threesome.
I find it funny. I don't know if this is just because Harrow. This is insane Harrow. How she cannot see God as a human being because he's so human. Like he doesn't come off as a divine God emperor. He's like I think it's very deliberate, right? That he's so
it's
human that he is.
there we've skipped over it, but there's also like there's almost like a C story in a way where like almost every chapter she talks about having tea and cookies with God, except that she never eats the cookies and she hates the tea, but they have little chats, right? And so like this whole time he's just chatting her up and trying to, you know, maybe semi-diagnose her, but also get her to like, you know, figure out what's wrong with her and how the lictorhood process went wrong and all of these other things. But yeah, like he's just a dude. And it's funny because like the way that it was written when I read it, like, you know, I was thinking, you know, like Dumbledore's actor, right? Like I'm thinking an old wizened, you know, wizardy kind of guy, even though the guy's clearly middle-aged from the descriptions. And then, you know, the director was telling me, you know, it's almost been a month or so now, but you know, the author is like, no, it's Taika Waititi. So this whole time you've got this Kiwi basically just like, you know,
Yeah, he
trying
is
to be
such a
like,
Kiwi.
you know,
But
yeah.
you
Well,
see
and
that
like
in-
once you make that connection, it's I can't unhear it basically, you know, and Moira definitely narrates it that way as well. So, but yeah.
There's also a disagreement between us here, between Alex and me and Justin. I think where we talked about off show last time that we think this God Emperor like super strong being can do very scary things, and he has done bad things, but he does not have this scary energy at all. So we were talking about what will play him because she couldn't see Taika, and now she's like, but you know, he's not scary. He's never scary. He does.
Oh, he's scary. I mean,
No, he does scary things. He has no scary like energy. He's not menacing. He's nothing. He's just a guy who can do really bad shit. I don't know. Like, I'll get to get my suspicions confirmed soon. I think in Nona.
yeah. We'll argue about that one when you have more context.
When you finish the book, sir.
Yes.
Like
Um.
until you're on the last page, you have not read enough of Nona to be able to talk about it. So
Yes, there are some brief moments onto a related subject of who is A.L. Annabelle Lee, and there's just these like little hints of like that person was very significant to John, to God, and who could this person have been? In the dramatis personae in the front, it has John Gaius, Emperor John Gaius, and Annabelle Lee, or A.L., his bodyguard. And then there's a list of the lictors, of the necromancers and the cavaliers, and lots of them are scratched out because they're dead.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually, and during this one of those little tea chats, Harrow asked, well, who is this person? And he says, a moment that Justin really quite loved. It's like, how about we start with a less uncomfortable question? Like, how about babies are made? Like, I've got a book of all of these things. Are you and an Anthe being safe? Yeah.
yes.
And her reaction was also good. It's like, we're not intimate. We're also not even, frankly, platonic. And Annabelle Lee, or that was his nickname for her, A.L., sometimes also known as Electo, although he doesn't say it right then, is his bodyguard that was put down because she was the first resurrected and some things were not quite done correctly, or something to that effect. He's a bit vague.
That's the story. I'm gonna ruin the mystique here just a little bit. God's a big fat fucking liar too.
Yes.
So just saying. Yeah.
No way.
God is a liar.
Yeah. There are rugs that lie less than this guy. So you're welcome. You're welcome. See, now that's a funny joke.
I'm not even sure I can trust his retelling in Nona. Like, when he's telling it, he's very unreliable.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. We don't know. He's the only one who has the account, but we don't know. And to go off of what he was saying, because she's not asking other people of who was A.L., and he says, well, she needed to be stopped, and Anastasia had a tomb. And so everything worked out kind of nicely. And how about we have some poetry? And he has poetry that he's written about her, and onto other things of these questions of like, but this question of who it was is hanging over Harrow the whole time, and basically over the whole series.
He was definitely an emo kid. Pulling out the poetry.
Did you get to that part yet in Nona? Because it's fantastic. So
I'm
just saying. He he kind of had a phase. Let's just put it that way. So
He had a few phases.
Quite a few phases in the retelling. He was.
yeah, but I mean, I'm saying, there's very clearly like an emo or a goth phase, So
I don't remember that.
Yeah,
but
keep reading then.
It would have been past that.
It's to me, it's hilarious. It's one of the funnier parts in Nona. So, but like the undisputably good parts of Nona, in my opinion, are the parts coming from God, where he's explaining everything pre-resurrection. Did you know that cows have feelings? So they have relationships.
That's what they
Still hilarious.
To be fair, I get his frustration. Every time he tries to do something, they're like, well, you kill cows, so, and cows have feelings.
Right.
Yeah. I'm going to pull us back to Harrow because Andreas hasn't finished the fucking book yet of Nona, and so we can't really dive into that until he's actually read the last word, which was a great last word, I think, if I remember right. So
I'm more thinking about get in line, but whatever. So
yeah, that is there's whatever. Okay, to describe something of Ortis, because after this dinner party threesome drunken fest, Harrow does go try to kill Ortis and doesn't find him in the training room where they expect him to be because he's a nerd about swords. And he has said several times, I want that sword that Harrow has, and she will not let that be taken away from her. And Mercy Martin's like, but you have plenty of swords. Go play with them, you idiot. So the only other place that Harrow has found him is, well, with Kitharea's body. And she had seen, and no one believes her, Kitharea up and moving and walking around like a crazy fucking zombie. Like, the description of it was like trying to move both sides of her body at once, and like so lunging forward with her right leg and her right arm in this crazy shuffle ship thing. And Harrow, as powerful as she is, just fucking ran because that was too terrifying for her, which is a very smart thing to do. But something's been happening to Kitharea's body, and Ianthe keeps saying, yeah, like sex things. So where did they go to? There's a bloody stain on the floor, and Harrow follows it, and it looks like Ortis probably was stabbed by something in his front by his own spear, and he finds Ortis in the incinerator somewhere else on the space station, and Kitharea is across the way up at the controls. A dead body is moving around, and Ortis is trapped, and instead of leaving him to die as she wanted to, Harrow is curious enough to save him, creates a tiny little weenie construct to go under the door and save him. I just like the callback of, like, with Kitharea at Canaan House, maybe could make a tiny little weenie little construct. But when saving him, having a conversation, and Ortis says, don't use bone wards, use blood wards, fresh blood wards every night, because thallergy cannot be voided out the way that thanergy can. And she says, why are you telling me this? And she, Ortis, like, touches her face, like, I know you're still in there, but just tell me one thing. Why did you take the bait? And then stops because they were interrupted. And afterwards, when she's trying to get information, she's like, why did you say that? Were you having a full conversation with me? What were you talking about? And he says, I don't remember. I forget. And Harrow has the same tone that she says of, like, I am insane. He says, I forget. This is another broken person who doesn't have control of their own life. Which does get explained.
This is really fucking important. And if you're not paying attention when you read it, you miss some important things. Just saying. Yes,
it is. And Kitharea's body goes missing. God is very rumpled and very annoyed. And everyone's a little bit more pissed
possibly
off.
Even cross. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think my favorite part with the whole Kitharea thing is, like, you get all of these little snippets of side conversations between, like, Augustine and Mercy Moore, and just being like, why are you fucking around with the corpse? I'm not doing it. I thought you were doing it. And so it's like the only two people that you get, like, kind of an insight into what the lictors are doing don't have any clue what's going on, and are also somehow not really concerned about it. But Harrowhark is not sure if she's hallucinating the whole thing or not, and got chased by the corpse at one point. Preceding this. And so, like, she's seen Gideon getting fresh with it. She's seen it literally, like, do, like, an exorcism level, like, chase her down the hallway. And then the other two lictors are like, stop fucking around. And no one seems to care that this corpse is presumably running around. And so you're getting a snippet from them realizing something's going on. So maybe she's not insane this time, but you can't be sure about each individual instance. And then finally, obviously, it tried to kill Gideon. So that's a pretty good indication that something's going on with this corpse.
Yes, something very significant. And the next, more significant things happen when one of the points of killing planets, as Mercy Martin drops her off and leaves her but that's kind of puts her in danger because Harrow does not have the active Cavalier to protect her. She thinks that she has misapprehended the process. And Mercy Martin's like, well, figure it out. You're the genius 2-year-old, and leaves. And while she's there on this planet that she's just has to murder at some point in about 6 hours, she runs into Camilla Hecht, who she believes is dead because she saw it at Canaan House of her and Palamides' face blown up by a gun by the sleeper. She's very confused, and she's bleeding from all orifices of her face.
But
she's pouring blood.
Yeah, it's just like it's
that bone is like poking out the other side, practically, like trying to kill her. So
yeah, but Camilla has some pieces of skull, and Palamides, before he died, had rigged his spirit to his body so it would not leave. And so she knows he's in there, but he has is this the right bit? Otherwise, I have to go find the rest of it. And the cohort took his body away. And Camilla's not a necromancer, so she can't do it herself into the river. And Harrow doesn't remember who Camilla is, has a letter written by her own dead self to give to Camilla that says that she has the sanctity of the tomb. And I did not. Yes, you said it was right there, black and white.
Right. I'm sorry to interrupt, but to retrograde this a little bit because I think the scene setup is fantastic, right? She and Mercy Morin go down to a planet to kill it, and it's like her 9th planet or whatever. Like she's done several others since then, and Mercy Morin's leaving her to her own devices and whatever for the first time, more or less. She's 40 billion light years from home, alone on a planet for the first time, and somebody's following her. And so this whole scene you're like, what the fuck? Yeah. And so she basically builds the scaffolding in the middle of a clearing and waits for whatever is hunting her, and it turns out to be Camilla, which is fantastic because we needed to see more of her, and it's like we're 40 billion light years from home. Like, how's this supposed to work? But
and Harrow's very confused. Like, how are you here? How can you possibly here? How did your bodies not get found at Canaan House? What has happened? She doesn't know what's going on, and she's bleeding a lot from her brain. But she owes a debt to Camilla, and so she's going to get into the river and try to find Palamides' soul. But she explains that after 9 months of inert staying in a soul, he is likely gone or driven insane. Because a soul, like a spirit ghost like that, can only really exist for a little while. And especially if it can articulate or move around, that helps. But otherwise, they're driven insane and probably gone. So she goes into the river, and she does find Palamides because he's extremely skilled. But the fact that he's been a ghost...
By the way, he's
wonderful.
Super into the funny.
He's so fun. But the fact that he's been a ghost for 9 months is astounding. And he's been stuck in the room that he died in, which has Kithareya, it was Kithareya's room, but she's not in there. Except there is a romance novel, which is very trashy. It's like Bridgerton, but with necromancers. Like, the necromancer is too pretty, and she's too good at necromancy, and the narrative doesn't like that one because she goes to parties, but the narrative does like this one, and he's all crank. And then they have a baby with an improbable phonetic lisp.
He's read that book
50 times or so. Yeah. Because he's got nothing else to do in this little bubble. And as confusing as it is, he describes that you can exert a bubble into the river. As Harrow keeps trying to say this isn't possible because the river is too chaotic, it's too flux. But you can exert space on non-space, he says. You exert your own rules if you can build them right. And he did. And so he's there and he's waiting to get contact with Camilla. And he doesn't know how much time has passed. Camilla's trying to find him, and significant things for Nona, but I'm not going to touch there. But as they're talking, and Palamides is being very friendly, and Harrow is like, how do you know me? We don't know each other. And every time that she tries to remember Palamides, she starts bleeding from the face again. And she describes that she's a lictor. He says, but you did it right, didn't you? You finished what I started. You did the mega theorem correctly, right? And she doesn't remember Gideon, but he does, and so it's very confusing. But she says at one point, like, I am a lictor. I am very capable. And said, I am so sorry about that. You really shouldn't have suffered that way. She doesn't know how to take it. But while in the bubble, they're invaded by the Sleeper, which was invading Canaan House. And she's like at the peak confusion right here of not understanding what is real and what isn't. And when she wakes up, she tells Camilla that Palamedes is there and transforms his tiny little bits of skull into like a hand and a wrist and something that can work. And then there's a shuttle there with other people in it, and she goes and finds Judith Deuteros, who is alive, even though she's seen her dead at Canaan House, and Corona Bestradentarius, who's also seen die at Canaan House, and a poster of a woman with bright red hair. And as soon as she looks at it, just like blood just start gushing out of her eyes and ears and nose.
I guess Gideon looks like her mom.
Yeah. Significant. And the letters say to silence Judith and to silence Corona, but without any pain, because Ianthe says there must be a complete lack of pain. But because they know, and we would probably talk about Gideon, they can't be allowed to talk to Harrow. At least that's what dead Harrow thinks. And Judith is trying to warn Harrow about the Emperor. There is a traitor in his midst, and there's something already, and then they silence her again. So Harrow leaves thinking like, oh no, there's a traitor in the Mithraeum, and who could that possibly be? And I really hope it's not Ianthe, but I'm not going to examine that thought anymore. But there's the question of, again, 40 billion light years away, like you said. How did they possibly get there? What are they doing? How did they leave Canaan House?
That's a thing I've actually been wondering. We only know about real space travel through the river and through these obelisks that they build that kind of travels through the river. It's either lictors do it or they build these constructs that help do it. How do Blood of Eden do it?
Well, I mean, spoilers, but kind of semi-minor spoilers. So one of two ways, and I'm not really sure why they don't use the former, right? But Blood of Eden might have at one time had a different FTL drive. Okay, that's your spoilers. Mm-hmm. And if there's actually a side story from Judith's point of view that talks about that shuttle that they have, that they were trying to use her to power it, and they needed necromancers to power it through a Steely. So you have to be a necromancer to do it, however that works. And then the Steelies are kind of like, I don't know, pick your FTL source of choice. They're going through a wormhole, or it's a Mass Effect drive, or whatever the case may be. We don't know the mechanics. They're just able to jump from one to another somehow. And for some reason, necromancy is involved because magic.
That's the obelisks, right? That's the
right. The Steelies, I think, help travel between obelisks, I think. And so that's one of the things that lictors will sometimes do. They'll travel via the river that other people can't. Put the obelisk down so other people can use them with the Steely.
Yeah. Like going through the river is really, really bad for normal people, but lictors are able to survive the journey, right? And it's apparently even more efficient because, first of all, they can just do it themselves, and they can submerge other craft or vehicles in the river with them, right, to use it to traverse. They could go 40 billion light years, and they don't obviously have to have gotten there a slower way to do it. So it seems like one of the other jobs of lictors is to go plant these obelisks around the galaxy to expand their Steely network, or whatever you want to call it, right? That's all implied, but that was kind of what I got out of it from a few other incidental things, is that one of the jobs of lictors is to set those up at various points so that the cohort can move around much more safely with the Steely drives. So
yeah.
Right. But Harrow doesn't know almost any of this. And so she's very confused and suffering in her confusion. And the deadline for when the Emperor is about to die is very, very close. And everything kind of comes to a head, I guess. Like there was one final time.
But she doesn't know that, right? Like
no, she doesn't.
She just knows. Yeah, that's dramatic irony, right? It's like, each of the chapters is like, 24 hours until the emperor dies, but she's like, oh, hey, maybe there's a traitor that I should not investigate whatsoever. Like, didn't have the slightest amount of concern, apparently.
Yeah.
So,
but something that does concern her is the thing that drives her crazy all the time is affection. And at one point, when she was hanging out with the emperor and the tea and not a biscuit because he learns that she's never going to eat it,
right.
He said something of like, I always thought of you kind of like maybe my own daughter, or I could have had one like you. I hope that AL would have liked you or something like that. And it's just the little bits of affection completely destroy her. She cannot handle it at any point. When Gideon was hugging her in the pool at Canaan House, she thought she was being drowned. That's fine. She can be calm while being drowned and murdered, that she deserves it. But the fact that she was being hugged, she cannot handle it whatsoever. So she gets onto the table, destroys all of the glasses and the tea and everything, and it confesses violently about having broken into the tomb. And she describes the whole process of going into it and finding it, undoing all of the traps. And it was a beautiful bit of necromantic and blood ward. And she found the body. And then as she got out, her parents killed themselves. And if this was the thing that the emperor could defeat once but not twice, and this is going to be his eventual death, did she kill 2 of her fathers that day? And he just says, but you can't have gotten into the tomb because it is a room with no door. It is impossible for you to have gotten into it. And no matter about her abilities, it's just a fact of impossibility. So whatever it's a big question. She doesn't know what's real anymore. And well, he lies or he's telling the truth. We don't know. Sort of. And then he's just trying to be nice and affectionate to her, and he touches her temple. It's like, who's been pressing on your temporal lobe? And she runs. She cannot answer this question. She cannot think about this question. But there's all of these implications. And there's one final time that Ortis the First tries to kill her, and it's kind of lackluster. Like, he doesn't really want to do it. And he says, I'm sorry. This is my fault. I didn't run hard at you, but it wasn't my idea. It's kind of a hint of what's going on. See. And then the epilogue, or the prologue, I'm sorry, gets explained is that she does get killed to the point where she leaves her body. And the reason for the second point of view comes about, which is the fact that it's been Gideon telling the story the whole time inside Harrow's brain. Gideon has been there. And when she was with Palamedes, you never would have guessed that he saw me was the last line of that section. And so then we get Gideon running around the Mithraeum, not knowing much, although it's kind of like it has a basic idea of some things.
She has to know. She told us the whole story.
She does describe that what she understands and remembers about people is kind of fuzzy, like trying to see something through a very long tunnel. But she has some basic understanding. Like, okay, Anthe is there. She's in Harrow's body. So the heralds and the resurrection beasts, and that one that's always so unhappy, like Mercy Morn. But they're all supposed to be in the river fighting the resurrection beast, and she's running around fighting gigantic bugs that ate Harrow's thumb. It had a hunger that only thumbs could satisfy.
I like her. We get Gideon, who's just like no bullshit and has seen this from a completely rational point of view because her soul has been unaffected by the brain pressing, I guess. And she rips Anthe and you want to know what you did? You did that on purpose.
Yeah. You couldn't handle being beholden to someone, and so you locked me away in your brain. And I wanted to say all of these things. I gave you my whole body and you didn't even want me, but also do some squats or maybe some star jumps, like I told you to lift weights. They're not that hard. Because Harrow cannot maneuver with the sword. Gideon doesn't have any necromancy, but she's stuck in a tiny body that doesn't have any muscles, trying to wield the gigantic sword, fighting a bunch of gigantic beasts. And this is when we start getting a lot of answers and a lot of confusion.
This is where the book gets good.
The book gets into hyperdrive because I thought it was already good. It just gets very intense. Harrow is stuck in Canaan House as she understands it, and she's talking to Abigail, and she remembers everything that she did of removing Gideon and all of these things of when Abigail asked what happened to the secondary soul, and she describes the electoral process. And I was like, no, that's not what I mean. You are being haunted. You are being invaded by the sleeper, and we have to deal with it or it's going to kill you. And so they get to fight the sleeper in an epic saga battle with Matthias Nonius, which I quite loved. And then Gideon is running around fighting gigantic bees that eat thumbs and runs across Mercymorn, who sees Gideon's eyes in Harrow's face and thinks that she's about to be murdered. And she starts talking to someone who isn't there, essentially. It's like, why are those eyes in your face? How does Gideon's Cavalier have those eyes, or Harrow's Cavalier have those eyes? And I never thought to look at the eyes when they showed me your body. And how did this happen? And you move like a human. You are human. And Mercy Morn is basically just losing her mind. And Gideon goes like, these people are so fucking old. They're demented.
Yeah, still, do we understand that by the end of Nona? Or did I miss something? You move like a human, you are human?
I finished the book. I can't describe that without...
So I find out Nona.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is, like, until you get to the end, there are certain things that can't even be told adjacently.
Yeah.
So.
But you have all the puzzle pieces and you have to put them together, I'd say. It's kind of explained in the same way of whatever happened with Pyrrha and Ortis the first.
The puzzle pieces now, or do I?
I think you do, but they'll spell it out more.
Get to the end, and then we can talk to you. You know.
Yeah, but it's not like we're only supposed to be at book 2 right now.
Well, I'm just saying. You know? Some of us read ahead, so get to the end. We can tell you.
Teacher's pet.
Right. We start getting answers because Mercy Morn is really freaked out about those eyes, and then she tries to capture Harrow with a net and a sword and all that, and then she gets shot and starts screaming insane, and a shot was sent by a rifle that was wielded by Kitharea's body, who Gideon doesn't realize what's happening to Kitharea's body, but she just remembers Dulcinea and flirting with her at Canaan House, and oh, that was so much fun, and having complex emotions. And Kitharea says goodbye and walks away. And Gideon goes running around the Mithraeum more, fighting heralds, trying to figure out what's going on, runs into Ianthe, and Ianthe's like, oh, I have this thing to give you for, what was your name again? Gonad? Gonad was kind of fun. And
it's crazy, though, because Gideon doesn't know how to read. Speaking of, hi. You silly.
Hello, Papa.
You need a hug?
Oh, he's adorable.
Say hi, the internet.
He's so cute.
All right.
Here's this.
Yeah?
Uh-huh.
All right. Take care. It's all fuzzed out, so I only knew he was there when I saw a face materialize on my camera. I'm like, oh, good.
Spooky.
Yeah.
Funny. Ianthe has a letter to give to Gideon from Harrow, and it says one flesh, one end, and it has the sunglasses in it, because that was the oath that the lictors take with the necromancers. Necromancers and Cavalier, one flesh, one end, because they join bodies, essentially. But with that, they go and find Augustine, and Augustine has basically the same reaction to Gideon in Harrow's face. He sees the eyes, he's like, oh my god, you've come to kill me. Wait, you're not real. And then they both go running away, and then they'll eventually get to John. And John is interrogating Cytherea, who's tied to a chair, and it's clearly not Cytherea, but they all describe that it as is Wake, which is a commander, a Wake remembrance of the valiant dead. And
no, that's not it. They call it the right way.
Okay.
No, you're missing it. Commander, wake me up inside. Sorry, I can't remember your entire fucking name right now. Like, it's so stupid.
It is
because
stupid.
10,000 years beyond Evanescence, but it's fucking hilarious to have him, be like, yeah, so this is Commander, wake me up inside. So
yeah.
Yeah, it's Commander Awake something.
Awake remembrance of these valiant dead. Kia Hua, Kote Pai, snap back to reality. Oops, there goes gravity.
Yes.
because
And
he
I
is
don't
a
get the,
millennial.
like words in the middle, obviously, but yeah, there. Oops, there goes gravity. Just really sells it. So
I looked them up. They're a Maori word of, I think it's some form of a thing that you say to dead people. I don't remember exactly what it
Gotcha.
meant. I'll look it up because there's more of that in Nona.
Is there a
and then-
reason Blood of Eden has these weird title names that I don't know yet?
I wish I understood that better too.
10,000 years of cultural drift. Don't worry about it. So
We suffer. Okay.
yeah,
Or Angel of Passions?
Our Lady of the Passions,
Or
I
Lady
think,
of the
or
Passions,
whatever. Yes, they have very strange names for their commanders. But to focus on Wake, because Wake, as she is known, is the one that is haunting Harrow. She is the sleeper, and in the fight with Matthias Nonius, that was summoned only entirely out of passion from Ortis the Ninth and Abigail as a ghost magician, and they use him, they summon him somehow from the river, and he comes back in all of his saga-like glory to valiantly fight with poetic violence to the sleeper who's trying to kill them with guns, because it's
I
the
fucking love that guy.
It was
And
so much
there
fun.
was some of the best, like, the best lines of the book happens here, where it's like, how is it? It goes. It's like something they say in the cohort.
chicken shits don't get beer,
Yeah, chicken shits don't get beer.
right? They
And
say
then
that
when he's just
after.
like, we had something similar back in the day.
What I found it's important to think about the scenario that they've been living in this version of Canaan House in the river that Harrow has built to explain her own memory problems and fight off a haunted sleeper that's trying to kill her. The sleeper wants Harrow's body and is attacking her, and everyone's going to try to defend her. And the sleeper Wake is enforcing rules on it, and then with the presence of Matthias, it starts changing into what his rules are in the sagas. So, have you ever read the Icelandic sagas or any of the Norse sagas, Andreas?
Even I mean, like the completely original stuff.
Like, I mean, the ones that were written down from Iceland, like Egil Saga or Njal Saga, anything like that.
School, I think, but like it's been like I don't know, 15 plus years.
But I read them in college, and I'm going to reread them again soon. And I quite love them, and it's a crazy mix of literally with Egil Saga that he is a warrior poet, and so he gets into rap battles essentially of he's beating some Swede's ass with a sword and giving poetry of how that person is some troll's bitch every ninth night, and then more fighting, and that's basically what Matthias Nonius does. He does the same thing, and he's then describing everything he's going to be doing, playing by the rules that Ortis has imagined him to be, and then he asks, "Why am I speaking in meter?" And no one answers. Because like, oh, he killed the sleeper enough, and that's it's banished at least from her body, and then they can all have a conversation. And that's when there is a giant monster out in the river, and one of my honored enemy is out there, and this little bit of discussion that Harrow and Ortis have been having of whether Matthias had ever actually seen or fought with the lictors. It's confirmed because Matthias says, yes, that one, the saint of duty, he is out there fighting the resurrection beast, and I must go help him. And that's when Marta says, I'm going with because chicken shits don't get beer. So everyone decides to go help him. They leave Harrow, they go fight the resurrection beast with Gideon. And there's this question about what is Harrow going to do? Is she going to go back to her body and then consume the rest of Gideon? But Dulcinea, who's really Dulcinea in this book, says, I'm pretty sure your body is moving around on its own accord, and that means that Gideon is there. Abigail and Magnus say, you should do the thing, complete the electoral process, and consume her because you could live for her for the rest of your eternity. But as Harrow puts it, there's a difference between saving a scrap of dance card and saving the last dance. And so she refuses to go back to her body. Her body, which is very confused with Gideon and watching Wake being interrogated still. And then Gideon the First walks in and puts a bullet in its brain. But to describe again, if Palamedes was supposed to be insane by 9 months of being a ghost, then Wake, it is impossible for her to have been a ghost haunting someone for 20 years. Mercy, Morn, and Augustine had walked in and seen what was going on and said, where the fuck have you been? Where you fucking left me in my bones and then in a sword and then in Harrow, essentially. So yes, it's she was just in the bones, in the crypt, in the niche. And then she jumped from there to the sword that Gideon the Ninth was running around with. And that's one of the reasons why Harrow always thought it hated her, because it did, because Wake does hate her, because she's a necromancer wizard shit. You following, Andreas?
Yeah.
Okay, because that was the thing that you were asking.
Yeah. I just don't know when did they go into was that when they were down to get the rapier? Was her bones there? Because there were a lot of bones around there.
There was a lot of bones. There was a niche that Gideon liked to think was her mother's niche, but I don't think that actually was. But at some point, somehow, the Wake's body would have been put out into the fields to work on the snow leak and the food production and all of that. It happened probably when Gideon was around 8 or so. But she got the sword when she was about 10. I don't know. She could have been haunting Gideon for a while and not really known it. But for 20 years, she's been a ghost. And the amount of the personality to be strong for that long is insane. Like, everyone is insane.
I wonder where Gideon gets her stubbornness from.
A lot of people. And so when Gideon Original Flavor walks in and he puts a bullet in it, in Kithurea's brain, and then Wake is gone and she flees and I don't know where she goes. I'm presuming that she's still a ghost somewhere out there.
She's in the river.
Yeah, it's right. Presumably she'd be in the river, but it's even harder like when you see them die on screen, but there's necromancy involved. So
right,
doesn't matter where they die in this book.
We don't get to see her in Nona. I'll just say that, but I'm very curious if she comes back again somehow, because she was a very important figure historically. She was the one that died at the Ninth House with a baby that they had named Gideon. And how did that baby get there? And this is the whole explanation of all of these notes that Harrow had been seeing of they're very cryptic, but they're very compelling also, with the different fonts and stuff I had mentioned. So Pyrrha in Gideon's body had been carrying on an affair with Wake for 2 years, at least, before Wake died, and had thought that the baby was hers, Pyrrha's, sort of, Gideon's. But it turns out that probably Kithurea and Mercymorn and Augustine had been doing a thing to try to figure out what was God afraid of. What was this thing that John had to put down in AL in Electo to make her inert in the tomb? And what if he couldn't kill her, as he said? So, but it was a blood ward that he had done, and a blood ward means that you need some amount of the blood to unlock it. And it didn't necessarily need to be his, because it could have been a close relative, like a child. So they had done the whole 3-something 500 years before, or 20 years before, with 500 years of planning. That's the one. And gotten his genetic material and sent it to Wake of, here's some dolls, here's some eggs, here's some emission. Put it together, make a baby, and then we can kill it at the tomb, and then we can open the door and see what the hell's going on.
Which is also why it could be feasible that she has been in the tomb.
Wake did not make it because she died on the way.
Yes, but it's feasible that the Harrow has been in the tomb.
Right, yes, because details, because Gideon...
But in a huge tragedy, the child died. Come on, I'm setting you up for it. You've got to do it. This is a huge spoiler, so don't listen if you're going to read these. That's you, Cody. Plug your ears.
Probably a little too
right. Right. So they had thought that the Ninth House operation had failed and nothing had happened and they wouldn't be able to do it. But Wake was so angry of the eggs you gave me all died and you lied to me and you still sent him back after me. And those notes that Harrow was finding, and it's great. The child they assumed that died because Gideon first, not Pyrrha, had chased her enough and she was compromised by being pregnant and giving birth actively, that she failed, died on the way, and baby was just raised by the Ninth, and it's supposed to have died, and yet didn't. And as they were growing up and fighting, and on the day that Harrow wanted to kill herself, and she had gotten to an argument with Gideon and clawed her face with her fingernails. So Gideon's blood and genetic materials on her hands going through the blood ward, probably on that day. But
this is one of those details that if you're not fucking paying attention, you miss. That's how she got in there. Oh my god.
That was the thing. And Gideon was saying, do you remember that day, the day that you clawed my face out? Like, is that the day that you wanted to die? And that was how she had gotten in, and that God didn't think was happening, and opened the tomb. And Gideon's putting all that together of who her parents was. And all the times when she was saying to either Harrow or to Crux stuff like, my parents are the most important people in the universe, and they're going to come get me someday. Your parents are the least important people in the universe, and they don't exist, and they're dead, and they hate you. Turns out her parent is the Emperor Undying of the entire fucking universe.
Hi, I'm dead.
Yes.
Yeah.
The baby died. No, I'm not fucking dead. Hi, not fucking dead. I'm dad.
2 books. This is the pun. We had to wait 2 books to find out. And it's like, even if I had read ahead, it's not like I would have fucking understood it. But she swore to us not to read ahead, that not to look into it, to just read the books. And I get to this pun, and I'm like, that's a pretty big pun. Is this the one? And she was so proud of herself. She was just so giddy. Look at that smile. Come on. Just, yeah.
It's an okay joke, but she hyped it up so much that it fell flat.
You had to get to 2 books of setup to get to that thing. To spoil it would have ruined 2 books of it.
Yeah. Oh, and we're still not done with that lineage and everything either. So like there's and Crux, like there's so many good moments at the end of Nona. So
yeah, Nona is. I liked seeing that. Next time.
Yeah.
Finish the book, Andreas, because I will spoil you otherwise.
I mean, I'll probably finish in the next couple of days, and then I can read something else. Woo! But Nona has been good. I've enjoyed Nona, by the way.
Nona was fun. Right. So we have learned that Augustine and Mercy Morn have completely betrayed John, and this was the thing that they couldn't handle, that John had lied to them, because he is a fucking liar, like a rug. There was a perfect lictorhood that causes the swap of both eyes to both people if the Cavalier didn't die like all of theirs did. And when I haven't really discussed it much, but 10,000 years, and these people, the lictors, have not gotten over the loss of their Cavaliers. Every other word is their Cavalier's name. They're going on and on about Alfred and Christabel over and over and over again. And the fact that there was a perfect version of lictorhood, and he knew it, he did it before anyone had ever tried it before, because their eyes had already been swapped by the time Augustine and Mercy Morn had ever met them, they think.
Yeah. God, we can't even. I know we can't even. I'm just saying we can't even dig into this, because like this would be a whole episode of like there's a whole set of cause and effect in a strong amount of theory that is involved in this. But at the end of the day, all they know is that he had somehow done perfect lictorhood before, he taught it to them. But yeah, there's just so much more to this story than they even realize.
And he says that he thought he was doing the right thing, that it was better this way. I don't know what that means. I would really like to know more of why he thought that. But it was that level of betrayal on that subject that they could not handle. And so Mercy Morn disintegrates him. It's he goes from a man into, like, what was the end of Watchmen? What happened to Rorschach?
Yes, I was going to say, she Dr. Manhattan's him, like, in this case, him playing Rorschach, right? She basically just, like, grabs him by the head or something like that.
I think they were just hugging each other because she was crying, and it's like, you can tell me that it was fine. You can even remove my memory, just like that little idiot had done. If she could do it, you can do the thing. And just tell me that it was good enough, and that that you're sorry. And then he said that he apologized, and then she just disintegrates him.
Yeah, just red mist. Boop.
Yes.
The god Undying, he died.
The Emperor has been murdered.
Yeah, he's been murdered by one of his lictors.
Yes. Augustine and Mercy Morn are talking about, we should get the population out of the system. No, it's too late. Let's just drop into the nearest star and kill ourselves in a suicide pact like we'd already discussed. And it's like, no, we have a duty to save all the people from the system, because if the Emperor is gone, Dominicus is dark, because that's where it gets its power from. And the sixth house might have been slagged in the ensuing flare and all these bad things. And then Mist starts coming together again.
Yeah. I was going to say, basically, there's some kind of symbiotic relationship between him and Dominicus, theoretically. So, but then the Mist coalesces.
Yes, it just kind of starts appearing on things, and then it gets to and there's like little bits of bone, and like piece by piece, he is put together again, completely naked, because that makes sense. His clothes are gone. Is like from
he did get
bones to sinew, bones and sinew and muscle and skin, and they just watch it. And it's only a couple of seconds, and it's really quick, but it also takes absolutely forever to watch it happen. It's such a crazy experience. And then he does that to Mercy Morn because she really pissed him off. But he's going to ask some simple questions to everyone. Are they loyal to him or not? Yes, no. And you know what the response is going to be if you answer wrong. And Gideon Zero, the first, comes up and says, yes, I'm loyal to you, John. And Ianthe is loyal to God. And when he gets to Gideon the Ninth, he says, you're my kid. I'm not going to ask this question. I'm sorry I didn't get through all your school recitals. Just stand over there and we'll be fine. And Gideon's brooding and mad and angry. And he's like, wait. And all this detail. So like she wants to protect Harrow. And God was the one sending Gideon the First, Ortis the First, to kill Harrow, to trigger the literal process to happen, as Mercy Morn eventually did, because Mercy Morn is the one who actually drove a knife through Harrow's heart and sent her into the river to die. And it's like, wait, you were trying to save her. That's my job.
Yeah.
Very angry at each other.
Once again, get in line. So
exactly. John turns to Augustine and is like, are you with me? I'll forgive you. We can go back at it with each other and it's fine. And Augustine says, no. And he drops the entire Mithraeum into the river. And they start going down towards the stoma of the resurrection, just like a resurrection beast. And we don't know what the stoma goes to, but they had described it as probably the mouth of hell. It is a depth of a river that it is bad to be in. And they had previously tried to get the resurrection beast through it, because then they disappear. And that's not going to be a problem later, I'm sure. We don't know. We really don't.
Yeah.
Augustine goes through the stoma. Ianthe is trying to save John. And the two without necromancy is Pyrrha in Gideon's body and Gideon in Harrow's body. Very confusing. And they're they don't have a way of getting out. They can try to swim in the river for all of 10 seconds that they would survive, or eat a bullet. And that's the only options that they've got. And this is when Pyrrha explains that she was having an affair with Wake the whole time. And she starts talking about, well, your mother would have taken the bullet. Well, jail for mother then. And they do swim. And then they wake up in a very confusing place. And we get the epilogue and not Gideon and not Harrow's perspective.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, we're way speeding through this stuff, but like Augustine and God, spend like most of a chapter wrestling underwater in the river, wrestling each other towards the stoma before Ianthe finally like intervenes. God gets out. She disappears in a wisp of bubbles, more or less. So she's totally gone. We're never going to see her again. And then they just kind of like wake up later. Right. So yeah, it just...
She picks the wrong thing.
Ianthe always makes the wrong choice. Yes, she is quite annoying like that. The last bit of Harrow is Harrow goes through the river after her own little Canaan house thing falls apart.
I am still confused by. Maybe by the end of Nona, but
no. Yeah, they don't really revisit that though, right? So
we'll get there. But she wakes up in what she recognizes as the tomb, the locked tomb, and that's where the body was. But the casket is empty, and it has her infantry sword that she's been carrying around, that is Gideon's, that she loves so much, and a copy of Frontline Titties of the Fifth, which Gideon had offered her at the beginning of the first book. And she says, not even a real publication, and she just happily goes to sleep. And then we're on a planet that's held by one of the Edenites, or the people that are fighting with the Empire. And there's like the person who cares for her, the person who teaches her, and the person who watches her, and this person that isn't named, but it's Nona. And they're going through the days, and it's really hot, and there's a lot of fighting, and they have to be so secretive. And she always asks, "Do you know who I am yet?" Because they're trying to figure out, is she Harrow or is she Gideon? Not answering that question right now.
Yeah. Then you guys can find out in 2 weeks when Andreas figures it out. So,
Yeah.
I think you have all the puzzle pieces, but maybe you need them put together. But
Maybe
I don't think anybody has all the puzzle pieces until the very end, and then even still, there's discussion back and forth. So,
Yep.
All
One
right.
more book to go in 2 weeks, and then it's we'll find something else to talk about. New books, new movies, new something.
Give us ideas on Discord if you pay us $2.
Yeah.
All right. Bye.
cheap.
Bye.